typical fashion, because we're such students of fundraising, I learned something the other day, and you brought it to my attention. We've had the good fortune of meeting brilliant fundraisers since we've been in fundraising for a number of years now, and this conversation's no different. So a good friend of ours, Brett Higgins, everybody, brought to my attention that there's a difference between, now these are really, really popular buzz terms for events and great, obviously great fundraising tools. The difference between a paddle raise and a fund to need. And I said, well, hold on. I've never heard anyone say that before, you know? And I'm like, okay, well, we got to talk about it. So, hey man, friend of the show, friend of mine, friend of HGA's. Thanks for coming back, Brett. Appreciate you, brother.
It's an honor to be here. Appreciate you.
Yeah. It's
it's funny that term, it is used quite often interchangeably.
I think this is the problem. We're gonna tackle this, but like an issue being without really thinking deliberately about what you mean when you say we're gonna have a fund to need, we're gonna have a paddle raise, and you brought to my attention to some clear delineation, and I want you to explain it to the audience like you explained to me the other day when you took me to class.
Sure. So before I answer that, just quickly, it actually matters.
It does. Yes.
As it affects the outcome for fundraising. So the quick synopsis is that a paddle raise is a method, right? Where, and it's self-explanatory. You raise a paddle, and ultimately at a fundraiser, you're raising that paddle to raise funds. Where that differs from a fund to need is that a fund to need actually provides the story and the purpose of it, where the paddle raise is actually the action taken by hand or display. One is a process, one is the motivation, in simple terms.
And just for audience members that are listening going, I've never had a paddle raise or a fund to need at my, let's just go all the way back to just like the idea of the inception of having one at your event. Like, hey, we're just now doing a live auction. Okay, well, you need a paddle raise or a fund to need, as well. Consider this at least. How do you start when someone goes, hey, Brett, you are our MC, our live auctioneer, and we want to do a paddle raise or we want to do a fund to need. How do you coach them up as to what's the best avenue?
Well, I mean, that's up to each organization's motivation too, right? So it's a matter of asking questions, which is what ultimately led us to having this conversation in the first place, is us having, a back and forth question conversation like we normally do. So it's asking them, hey, what are you trying to accomplish? And the reality is sometimes it's a simple paddle raise, which is the most straightforward process. You ask for funds, and typically that would be that the organization is going to take the funds that you give in that paddle raise and appropriate them as a need arises, whatever that need may be at the time. And that is universally probably the most frequently done and most successfully done if you were to just isolate the two. But there are combinations of the two that often work, where you do a paddle raise again, and a fund to need, by the way, is usually executed through the process of a paddle raise.
That's what I wanted to get to.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So sometimes an organization at either already do, or we've had a conversation and find out that a combination is good, because you may do a paddle raise at higher levels, and then maybe at another level, there'll be an opportunity where that specific level could be used to fund a specific need very particularly. So anyone that gives at that particular level, it will be used for this specific designated purpose. And I think that's the easiest way to kind of say it through illustration. You and I had talked, and I had written an article to this effect, and I think it should be on HGA's site.
It'll be in the show notes too, that folks can access it as well. Absolutely, yeah.
Perfect. So that our conversation motivated me to write an article about it.
Yep.
And in that article, I use a specific example of one of my nonprofits that I work with, and it's an organization called K2 Adventures Foundation. And again, you'll be able to read about it, but ultimately what happens is they do a paddle raise, And it's a general paddle raise at most levels, but there are a couple that are specifically done differently where they fund a need. So at their $250 level, the example that I gave is they actually help people here in the United States, but also in Tanzania. And in Tanzania, for a person to be disabled or missing a limb or something to that effect, historically and in that area, it's very often viewed that that person is disabled or lost a limb or whatever because they're cursed.
Mm-hmm.
And so it might be a real challenge for them to get employment, and not having employment in a place where it's already a struggle to have food and the like is pretty problematic.
Mm-hmm.
And so K2 Adventures at the $250 level, every $250 is what it costs essentially in Tanzania to provide a prosthetic leg. And you're not just buying a leg, you're actually buying what in many cases there is a person's ability to live.
Yep.
And not be viewed as cursed and all the struggles that come with that.
Mm-hmm.
So they tell that story very well. One of the founders, his grandfather actually was missing a leg. Now he was here in the United States, but they serve a lot of people out of the country as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the way they tell that story is really purposeful, and the support at that level is astronomical.
Okay.
And when coupled with images and the story behind it and the effects it has on a person, it really touches up their heart. And so that the fund a need at that level is phenomenal.
Let's get in the mechanics of that a little bit too, because you're talking about telling the story. Obviously, that one, I mean, I'm sucked into the story that you were just telling. I'm sure the audience is as well. Video, is someone speaking to it before you do the fund a need portion of the program? Talk about the mechanics of it with this particular case study.
So at this event, which I've done for several years, around 10 years or so, I mentioned earlier they do a general paddle raise, and it starts around $25,000 or $50,000. My recollection is vague, but it's around $25,000, I think.
Okay.
And they get support, and that's a general ask. Now, mind you, we might give examples of what funds used at that could be used for, but it's not, we might mention several bullet points as to what that could accomplish, because one of those bullets could speak to a person's heart differently than another.
Yep.
Right. And then so we work our way down, asking at 10,000, 5,000, 2,500, and we work our way down to 250. And at that $250 level, because Kevin, the co-founder's grandfather, as I mentioned, was born without a leg and had a prosthetic, he recognized the difference it made in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And since he's gone with them to Tanzania, this became an immediately blaring need in their eyes, and you can understand why. So rather than me speak to it, then I invite Kevin on the stage, and then it's accompanied with images on the screen. Kevin speaks to it, gives the background of it, and that is more impactful than me getting up there and saying, "Hey, you're buying a leg."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And now I would say it differently than that, but it's
Yeah.
personal to him, and therefore it becomes personal to everybody there, and they can see the impact via images on a screen.
Yeah.
Sometimes they play a video. But it really makes a difference in fundraising. And so you can see the differentiation through that illustration of why they're really different. Now they work very well together.
Coexist well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also like, in a perfect world with an organization doing work like this, would you recommend, if the folks, the dev team that you're meeting with, the events team that you're meeting with at a particular organization for a particular event, would you recommend, if you could get everything you wanted doing the event yourself, that they start with a general paddle raise and then end up with a fund a need that can be laser focused on fulfilling a need like this? Like, are you nudging organizations to think of, okay, can we get something at the $250 level, $500 level, $150 level, whatever the level might be, that funds a specific need that we can explain very concisely, like this, for instance?
Yeah, I wouldn't start with anything, candidly. Otherwise, I'm not doing my job as a consultant and an auctioneer and fundraiser to listen.
Yeah.
That's the only way you can really make meaningful impact or give meaningful advice, for that matter. So the consultation has to be as collaborative as anything,
Right.
right? We just don't want to make it transactional. And
Totally.
that's why, paddle raise, ask, fund a needs, all those things, however, whatever phrasing you apply and application in this case, right? The reality is I try to put myself in the room of the person who heads the organization, right?
Yeah.
If what they're telling me appeals to, I'm a normal person and just like you, right? And so I try to sit in the seat of a person who's never been to that event before. And because in this case, I haven't, right? So we have conversation. And if it touches my heart, then we discuss it and think, okay, now based on the experience I have in working with organizations like K2 Adventures Foundation and a handful of others that really well execute a paddle raise in conjunction with a fund a need, then we have a conversation. And one of the other examples I give in the article of a children's burn unit at a hospital.
Okay.
And they need a whole bunch of things, right? But if we were to execute a paddle raise, let's say at $15,000, and that's because they need a floor cleaner. Now, a floor cleaner at a burn unit in a children's hospital is important, right? For a whole bunch of reasons, right? They have to keep it clean. It's purposeful. It's not just aesthetic. It actually affects whether things can affect a child who's been burned severely, right? So it's important, but that doesn't tug on my heartstring like saying, hey, we have a 5-year-old child who was burned in a house fire, lost some of his family, and here he is in the hospital, and what you give at the $15,000 level could help that child not only survive, but live a long life.
But thrive. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That tugs a little bit more than saying we need a floor cleaner.
Right.
Even though that $15,000 they give might buy the floor cleaner.
Totally. I want to back up. Am I off base by thinking that we had the discussion about monthly giving, how it ties to the $250 level at K2? Were we talking about that as well?
I think we branched off of this conversation in some measure, but it wasn't specific to that.
Yeah.
You and I've had many discussions about, giving beyond just a paddle raise. And I use the illustration. K2 allows it at any level, where if you'd like to give $25,000 at the $25,000 level, or any level that they have as a part of their paddle raise.
Yeah.
They'll allow you, if at checkout, just let us know if you'd like to write a check for that tonight or whatever, process that transaction. I hate to say that, night. Or would you like to break it down over the course of, 6 months, 12 months, whatever? And I think when you and I were talking, I illustrate it with a client this way, because some nonprofits have a much larger staff capacity, things in place that easily facilitate that breakdown over the course of 12 months, right? Some, it's a little harder because they're small. They don't have something in place, and so they might be resistant. But the way I illustrate it is, if I go buy a new car, I might not have the ability to write a $25,000 check. But instead, I get financing, and I might have a $500 or whatever, for round numbers, car payment over the course of so long a period of time. And therefore I can afford a $25,000 car. So why are we not allowing someone at the $2,500 level to give $200 a month?
Yep.
Right.
Totally.
And too often organizations don't K2 is a great example of an organization that allows that at any level. Now, obviously, people don't use it at the $50 level, but if a kid wanted to break into their piggy bank every month, they would facilitate that, because they recognize that for fundraising, that might actually be the difference between a person writing a $250 check that night or committing to $2,500 over the course of the year, and they might be just as willing to do that.
That's the reason why I brought it up, is because it stuck with me, because I've been on one about the subscription economy, the finance approach that we're so used to in our lives, and that because donors are consumers at the end of the day, they're used to in their lives. And then you had illustrated how K2, for instance, provided a membership program. You're part of a community. You get access to different community events when you do sign up for the monthly program. And I love the interplay, more importantly, the opportunity to get folks to give if they break it down monthly, and using the paddle raise fund and need, because they coexist quite nicely, as an opportunity to get folks to give monthly as well.
Yeah. So at their, they have a $600 level.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
And we, normally an organization would do 500. They do 600. And if you give at the $600 level or any level prior to higher than that, they automatically become a Summit Society member at K2.
Yep.
And as a result, they're invited to special events. They're the first to find out about things that are happening. They get emails monthly. They're in a club that a lot of people want to be a part of because of the picture that they paint affiliated with being a Summit Society member. And so not only are they getting, they've never expressed this, but they're getting an extra $100 per person versus doing a $500 level, which is traditional. And I love things that are not traditional sometimes.
Me too. And more money in the door. Yeah.
Yeah. And why not get the extra $100 out of people? And they get something in exchange for having done so and been generous. And sure, maybe there's some attrition at the $250 level, but isn't that okay?
Totally. And I'm stealing from a fundraiser, Dave Raley, who wrote Sustainable Giving, and he also mentions the likelihood that someone gives more over time is far greater when they become monthly donors. Also, organizations, dev teams, anyone is looking for different ways they can interact with donors, right? Like always looking for, and we always,
how can we get in front of them constantly? Yeah,
precisely. And you just laid out 5 different ways, the community events, first to know that now there's not an excuse, a reason to share what's going on monthly in a newsletter, a thank you call, when folks are welcoming the program, all of these beautiful things that can just come out of a paddle raise fund to need, the monthly giving component. Once again, being a little unorthodox and asking for 600 as opposed to 500 when you're probably going to get plenty of $500 commitments, but why not ask for more? Because everyone's there in the zeitgeist of the evening and what have you, and understanding the work. I just think it's awesome. Once again, massive opportunity that can just that's once again created by this coalescence of the paddle raise and the fund and need. I think it's huge. I think it's awesome.
Well, and I've shared this statistic with you, and I'm having trouble finding it in print, but I have seen it evidenced. I read it years and years ago that 96% of the people, when polled related to a fundraiser, had more money to give, but weren't given an outlet that appealed to them. And that's what it's really about, right? Because there are a lot of different reasons that people give. People give when there's personal connection. People give out of empathy, some out of competition, some to be seen as leaders. Some are just egomaniacal. Some want to be a part of something meaningful. There's a whole bunch of different reasons to different people as to why they give. And as a nonprofit, being a part of a fundraiser, you want money from all of those people to support the efforts that you're putting forth to serve, right? And so you have to appeal in different ways to different people. At K2, sometimes that's providing a prosthetic leg. And a lot of the people that give a prosthetic leg might have only given $100 if you didn't do a good job of telling them what it accomplishes and making it meaningful to them. And you can be broad and be just an amazing organization helping kids who are part of a burn unit, whatever that might be. Most of the people there, we hope, right, have a connection to or something appealed to them that motivated them to be there. Sometimes it's just an invitation to dinner, whatever that might be. But the hope is that something appealed to everyone. And if you don't provide multiple outlets, multiple things that appeal to people's hearts and their wallets as a result, then you might be leaving a bunch on the table, and 96% of the people said they do. So how do we get it? We appeal differently and in many different ways. And sometimes you get it multiple times from the same person that night, for that matter, or over the course of a year or longer.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't help to think it's just a lovely way to get folks involved once again throughout the year. The whole calendar is involved, and I love the community piece because with the example you shared and first to know and VIP access to this and, first to know about the event that's coming up and what, I mean, we're so community driven. That's another, I don't have the data point to suggest it. However, it has been suggested ad nauseum, especially recently, how much folks are craving that community piece. Obviously, we're very bullish on events. I know you are as well, without putting words in your mouth.
No, you don't have to.
But I also love that, what can be derived from conversations like this as well as fundraising is an and equation, not an or. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be and.
Right.
Yeah, and we all win.
I'm gonna divert the path a little bit, and you may have been going there with your question. I don't know,
Yeah.
because this is something we talked about in our conversation. There are times when a fund a need can actually hurt you.
Explain.
You can do it too much, or because different things appeal to different people. Let's say a person has capacity to give it $25,000. Okay, and if compelled to do so or moved to do so, they will give it. But you designate that in a fund a need way or a very specific way that $25,000 would be used, and that doesn't appeal to that person. But what you say at 10 resonated more with them. And that level 10, you said, this goes to do this thing, and that thing mattered more to the person.
Right.
You're leaving $15,000 on the table because you designated both of those levels for something specific. And that something specific appeals to one person, but not another, and maybe not to the person with the extra $15,000.
Right.
And I've seen fund a needs done at every level.
Yeah.
And I've never seen that done well. Now, I work with another organization called House of Refuge, and they provide single parent homeless families, which is a very problematic thing here in Arizona and many places, by the way, where a wife and her children escaped the home because they were victims of abuse and therefore they're homeless. It was safer to be homeless than at home. And so they have housing in a whole neighborhood here in the East Valley in Phoenix, where they help them with a physical home of their own, where they have some kids have their first bed ever of their own, where they're not sharing it with their sister or brother. They help them get back on their feet and work and whatever. And the turnaround cost or investment in having that accomplished is $25,000.
Okay.
I can't remember because I have a lot of clients.
Let's just say
but in principle, that's what it is. So let's say it's $25,000. To say that you would be funding an entire family's ability to get back in a home, off of not living in their car, not couch surfing at friends' homes, having a bed of their own kitchen. They have a store where they can go and get food for their family and serve meals in their home. And that's the turnaround cost. And that's a very appealing thing. And a lot of people will fund that. Now, you can't do that at every level because, first of all, it's not true. Now, you could give examples at at other levels where, hey, we mentioned this might be the first bed that a child would have of their own that they don't have to share with their sibling. And do that at another level and say that that's an example of what you could accomplish at such a level. At some point, we try to give examples so that we're not pigeonholed into using those funds specifically for this, right?
Right.
And even at the $25,000 level for that home, that doesn't mean that it's all going to be used for, I mean, the needs change, right? So a family may be back on their feet in 6 months and a home would open, or that the regional economy changes or something happens drastic. There's a hailstorm and all the roofs in the neighborhood that they have are damaged. And we've now said that all of those funds are going, of the $25,000 that you gave, are going to serve this singular purpose of creating a new home. But now all the other homes have no roof because you said these are being specifically used this way and someone felt that and you gave that message. Now we're stuck.
Yeah.
So it can be a double-edged sword, so to speak. And so you have to use some discretion on when you actually use a fund a need versus a paddle raise because things change. And so, and that might not be the best example, but it is an example and there are plenty of them.
Yeah. I think it's another example where if you've got a $25,000 level donor and something like that unforeseen happens, I think it's just a great example to get on the phone with them and explain it.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, and obviously that's long after the night of a gala.
Yeah.
And most of this is speaking of that, right? I don't use an event to satisfy my own ego, candidly. And I'm not saying that in a braggarly way. I'm just saying I don't care if they don't give it that night and they give it over 12 months because I actually care about the nonprofit being the most successful they could be.
Yeah.
Right. We talked about it earlier, but look, I do a lot of events. I can't give every organization I work with $1,000.
Sure.
Right. But there might be if that weren't what I did for a career, and I was at one of these events, I might not be able to write a check for $1,000 to the couple I go to every year or whatever. Right. But I could theoretically give them, $100 a month.
Yeah.
And now they've gotten 1,200 from me. So they got an extra 200 and I can digest. We talked about that earlier, but I'm just trying to put people in the room. And if that happens over the course of 12 months, fantastic. I would love for them to get an extra $200 to help serve their mission and who they serve. So I just think there's a lot of great things that can come from the knowledge of the difference between a paddle raise and fund a need, particularly the night of an event, and how sometimes it's fantastic. And other times you have to use some real wise discretion and coupled with having the experience of someone looking out for your best interest from a consultant standpoint, an auctioneer standpoint, leadership's standpoint, all of those people collaborating. And as we talked about earlier, ask questions, listen to the answer, think about what really would serve best. And it has the recipe for being incredibly successful as long as you do it well and do it thoughtfully.
Wow. You tied a beautiful bow on that.
I think it's a great topic. And that's why it's, look, I don't want to make it semantics, right? Because the terms are often interchangeable, but it is important in principle, right? Whether you use the term right or not, the principle really matters in execution at a gala or even beyond, and making sure you understand the difference in purpose.
And it gives you the opportunity to think about it, be deliberate about it year after year, of course. Massive. I think it's huge. I want to, as I mentioned in the show notes, that article that you wrote about the difference between the two will be in there. There will also be a link to connect with Brett on LinkedIn, and also a link to Brett's website as well. If you have any other questions, Brett is a friend and, once again, a world-class auctioneer. And if you have any other questions about the differentiation of the two and what's the right approach, and just once again just the thoughtfulness behind it, reach out to Brett, and I'm sure he'd be happy to spend some time with you. I'm putting your business in the street, brother, without asking for permission, but I I know you're game for it.
Look,
But
it's not even, it
yeah,
doesn't even have to be my business. Look, I can't
yeah,
do every event, right? I
yeah,
can't, but I'm happy to help nonprofits be successful because that's why I do what I do.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm just once again these monikers are so common and so buzzworthy and thoughtful in how they should be executed at events. So I'm just glad that you were able to have the conversation with the audience with me today, and I'm sure everyone got a lot out of it. So thanks so much, brother, for coming. Appreciate
Thanks
you.
for having me, man. I love talking to you.
Good stuff. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. Like I said, reach out to Brett, connect with him on LinkedIn, ask more questions, all that good stuff, and we'll see you all next time.